Now, the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan currently stands at a major crossroads as its capital, Kabul, remains encircled by thousands of Taliban fighters being held back as they await a peaceful handing over of the capital by the incumbent Afghan government. Described as the single biggest policy disaster since the Suez crisis by the chairman of the UK's Commons Foreign Affairs Committee, Tom Tugendhat, the mood among the international community at the recent reversal of the country's fortunes can best be described as somber and in a state of disbelief at how rapidly the worm has turned. Now, to discuss more on the fallout, we thought of inviting the envoy in Colombo, His Excellency Ashraf Haidari, joining us tonight on the news. A warm welcome.
Thank you very much.
A tragic situation. Unfortunate to hear what's happening in Afghanistan. In your country, give us a brief about the situation there.
Well, unfortunately, the situation is very concerning, and the statement made by this senior British official is correct. Unfortunately, this was not supposed to happen. No Afghan had expected this to happen, but unfortunately it has happened simply because of the abrupt withdrawal of U.S. forces and their enablers, on which our forces had long been depending to defend Afghanistan and to ensure also regional stability and international peace and security. So we see what has unfolded, unfortunately, and where we stand today.
Well, since the fallout of Taliban in 2001 following the September 11 attacks, I think the country looked somewhat on the road to modernization. But it's unfortunate now with the recent withdrawal of U.S. troops. Shortly after the withdrawal, this situation unfolds. Tell us about what's happening here. How are you all dealing with the international community? What is the response there now?
Exactly, and that's the tragedy of all this, that since the fall of the Taliban in 2001, over the past 20 years, Afghanistan has made transformational gains in terms of democracy, women's rights, human rights, and of course economic development and connectivity, internal and external, and overall, building hopes of even moving forward to build on what has been achieved over the past 20 years with the support of the international community. But unfortunately, that is now unraveling because of the withdrawal of U.S. forces, unfortunately, and also a lack of effective and tangible international response over the past 2 years when this peace process was initiated under the former Trump administration, which was supposed to result in a results-driven peace talks between the government of Afghanistan and the Taliban, so that with U.S. fulfilling its commitment of withdrawal, with that, although we were not a part of the negotiation of that agreement, we released over 5,500 terrorists and drug traffickers, of course members of the Taliban movement, as a gesture of goodwill and also commitment to making peace in order to prevent exactly the situation that has emerged today. But the Taliban also, under that commitment, under that agreement, made several commitments, including reducing violence and committing to a ceasefire, and then engaging with us in a serious peace talk towards a sustainable political settlement, which unfortunately they have not, and reneged on each of those commitments. And as that happened, then the Biden administration suddenly announced the withdrawal of all of their forces and all their enablers, including the contractors that used to provide logistical maintenance and air support assistance to the Afghan National Security Forces as they had been providing protection and defense of Afghanistan. So that's where we are now.
Now with the Taliban assuring that human rights, fairness for women, the media and Afghan national military personnel, what faith do you have in these assurances, especially to the diplomatic community too? The Taliban have been assuring that the transition will be smooth. However, we see that the US, UK missions are pulling out of Afghanistan as immediately as possible.
Unfortunately, that too, these evacuations, as we have been seeing, and now thousands of forces being sent to Afghanistan, have completely demoralized not only our forces, which had been fighting very fiercely in different parts of Afghanistan, but also this, resistance movement fighters, but also now demoralized the Afghan people, because as they see, is the embassies evacuating their civilian staff and diplomats, and that is telling the Afghan people that you're abandoned, we don't care, we don't care about whether you can sustain what you have achieved with us or without us, and so forth. So it's a very unfortunate situation, but let's see whether the Taliban would actually deliver on their assurances. And that, as we speak, I think begins with the situation in Kabul, that they must not enter the city as they've committed, that they must stand by and wait for a resolution forward in order to make the transition peaceful and without doing additional harm to an already suffering population. Remember, 500,000 Afghans have been displaced. Many of them have ended up in Kabul on the streets and the parks, exposed without food, shelter, water, and so forth, amid a COVID crisis where in Afghanistan, unfortunately, people are so overwhelmed and so worried about their day-to-day survival that no one is really caring about the COVID situation. And then you add on top of that the adverse effects of climate change, the ongoing drought in Afghanistan, and as well as these climate-induced floodings which have destroyed so many homes and arable land and livestock on which these innocent civilians depend on. So we would like to see that the Taliban abide by their commitment and wait for this process to happen peacefully, and to ensure the safety and security of the population of Kabul, which is a vast population, simply because of the years of war and violence. Unfortunately, most people have migrated from rural areas into Kabul. So it's densely populated, and God forbid if the safety and security is not assured, and the assurances that you pointed out the Taliban will not deliver upon, then we might see violence mostly affecting an already suffering population.
We understand, as you said, nearly a 500 population is attempting to flee Afghanistan or are displaced, and at the same time Sri Lankan authorities have assured that around 50 Sri Lankans living in Afghanistan measures will be taken to repatriate them to Colombo. But what would be the fate of the population, the estimated 500,000 that is affected, seeking support? What support are you seeing from the international community here, and how do you expect to see this transition of power? I know there is talk about this, but how smooth? How is it to happen? How is it expected to happen?
First, the Sri Lankan civilians stuck in Kabul, I'm sure that work is being done to help evacuate them, and of course there are assurances from all sides to ensure the security and safety of diplomats or other foreign citizens in Afghanistan. Second, to your question of who's helping, the government has been helping IDPs in Kabul, but also the United Nations agencies have been providing relief assistance. And they have appealed for $1.3 billion. They have about 40% of that met. They've been calling on additional assistance to meet that appeal, which I also call right now on the international community to meet that need, because really the needs of these vulnerable people are increasing by day, and more people are actually adding to this. And the last part of the question was how
the transition of power, and how
the transition is happening. I believe as we speak, there is a delegation that has just left for Doha, and to see the talks that would happen there and the issues that they would discuss. We've also just heard that the president has just left the country. The implication of that and how that would be, figured into this talks. And we only hope for a peaceful transition. My personal focus, having a people's background and having been displaced and, of course, been through conflicts and very difficult life in Afghanistan, I only hope that whatever that from now on happens would not affect innocent civilians.
Thank you very much for your time here in our studios. Our thoughts and prayers are with your people, and we deeply feel for what's going on in Afghanistan.
Thank you so much.
We had with us the Ambassador of Afghanistan here in Sri Lanka, Ashraf Haidari, joining us.